I have to say that when Russia decides to spread its tactical nuclear weapons also to Belarus, I think it's, of course, not only showing the force, but being prepared for this kind of worst-case scenarios. And we have to be prepared also ourselves, not only nuclear issues, but also chemical weapons, and nowadays more and more cyber and hybrid warfare.
Let's talk now to Pekka Haavisto, who is the Foreign Affairs Minister for Finland and joins me on the line. Good afternoon to you, Minister.
Good afternoon.
How significant a moment is this for you?
Of course, this is a historic moment because we have been military non-aligned, even if as a member of European Union, we have, of course, followed the European Union security policy, foreign and security policy, but this is now about our accession to NATO, and of course we will be the 31st member. I think Finns are very pleased that the process has now been advancing.
Right. Russia says it's a decision based on Russophobic hysteria. What do you say to that?
Well, there's nothing to do with the Russophobia. I think the decision was made after Russian invasion to Ukraine. We saw what can happen in our neighbourhood. We have 1,300-kilometer common border with Russia. It's a peaceful border, but of course we have to prepare for all kinds of scenarios.
Well, you'd mentioned that border. How real are your fears of Russian aggression?
Well, of course, when you have a war in Europe, it's not a new thing that war can always escalate and there can be incidents. Also in other regions, we, for example, have been following the explosion of the Nord Stream pipeline in the Baltic Sea area and so forth. So the war and the happenings are quite close to us. And of course, Finns are very security-oriented people based on our history. And I think our normal military can oppose many kinds of risks, but nowadays you can also have many unconventional risks. Even the loose talk about the nuclear weapons or tactical nuclear weapons is, of course, something that we should take seriously.
Well, that you say, take that seriously. A lot of people now, we've heard these warnings and these threats from Russia, from other countries about the risk of nuclear war. And people have started to maybe get a little bit complacent and think, well, there isn't a real risk anymore. What do you say to that?
Well, I have to say that when Russia decides to spread its tactical nuclear weapons also to Belarus, I think it's, of course, not only showing the force, but being prepared for this kind of worst-case scenarios. And we have to be prepared also ourselves, not only nuclear issues, but also chemical weapons, and nowadays more and more cyber and hybrid warfare.
Do you think people are becoming complacent about that threat?
Well, I think it might be that we have been living so many peaceful years in Europe that these are coming as surprises, that there are also military threats and some traditional military threats, some new and unconventional threats.
Your reasons for joining NATO, clearly to reduce the risk of an attack by Russia, but might it also be, it might have the opposite effect and invite Russian aggression?
For us, of course, it's to raising the threshold of any aggression against Finland, but we are also providing actually our security capacity, our strong military and so forth, our advanced technological military choices to the whole of the NATO. And of course, we look the security with the 360 degrees inside NATO. So whenever any NATO country is attacked or under threat, I think it's responsibility for all of us to defend.
Well, in that context, Turkey, of course, had delayed your bid to join NATO, and they're now doing the same with Sweden. How difficult has that been, and what is your message to the Turkish president?
Well, of course, it has been difficult for that reason that when you look the map in the Nordic countries around the Baltic Sea, we face very similar security threats. And when you make a NATO military planning, it's very difficult to protect the Nordic countries without Sweden. If you take Sweden out of the map, you cannot plan good defense. And for that reason, the sooner the better. Sweden also should be member of NATO, and we hope that this will happen after the Turkish elections, before the next July summit of NATO in Vilnius.
This war now has been going on for a year, as of course you know. The Kremlin ally, Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko, has called for an immediate ceasefire without preconditions. So for Moscow and Kyiv to start negotiations on a lasting peace settlement. We all want peace, but what is your reaction to that?
Well, we all want peace, but of course, if Russia stops fighting, the war is over. If Ukraine stops fighting, the government of Ukraine has done. I think it's Ukraine has been attacked by Russia. Ukraine has, according to the UN principles, the right to defend themselves in these circumstances, and they have the right to ask help from the others until the UN Security Council solves the problem. And the problem is that UN Security Council is paralyzed because of these veto rights of Russia and China. And the moral authority has been used by the UN General Assembly, but of course it's very much up to the responsibility of Russia to stop this invasion.
And just finally, we've been covering throughout our programme the news from America about the indictment of Donald Trump. He's boasted that if he returned as president, he would end the war in Ukraine in one day. How concerned are you that there's a pressure in America, particularly among the Republicans, for America to sort of withdraw its involvement in the war in Ukraine?
Well, of course, we have been following the political debate in the US, and I think it's very important that we have this transatlantic link and work closely together between Europe and US on all security matters. And of course, if there is any plans of withdrawal of European security from the US side, of course, it's negative news for Europe.
Pekka Haavisto, thank you very much for joining us. The Foreign Affairs Minister for Finland there on the day that Finland joined NATO. At Times Radio, we bring the front pages to life. Tune in to hear me, Cathy Newman, on Drive every Friday, 4 till 7.